Rich Alpha King bought the poor Omega bride no one wanted, then froze when he saw her face. The veil came off. The king's face went white. His hand froze midair. Everyone in that auction hall saw it. The most powerful alpha in the kingdom just saw the face of the Omega bride no one wanted, and he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Because 10 years ago, this girl died saving his life. He sent 50 soldiers to find her body. They told him she burned with the rest. But she's standing right here, alive, scarred, staring at him like she's deciding whether to run or let him remember what his family took from her. And what he just did, paying 5,000 gold for a dead girl, is about to destroy everything. Hey, beautiful soul, you found us, and we're so glad you're here. This is where broken girls become queens, where underdogs rise, and where love changes everything. If you've ever felt like you weren't enough, these stories are for you. Subscribe to join the pack. Like if you're feeling it. Comment your thoughts. We love hearing from you. You're not just a viewer. You're family now. Welcome home. Munville. Now let's get into the story. Chapter 1. The Auction. King Nicholas Gerard stood in the shadows of the auction gallery. Pocket watch closed in his palm. 4:47. The bidding had been going for 2 hours. The great hall of Velmara's capital reeked of perfume, gold, and desperation. His hand rested on the cold marble railing, the weight of the crown he'd removed and left in his carriage still pressing phantom-heavy on his temples. Below, on the platform, Omegas knelt in a silent row, each waiting for a bid that would decide her life. Torchlight cast dancing shadows across silk banners bearing house crests. Winter cold seeped through stone walls despite the roaring fires. 6 months since the council's ultimatum. 6 months of being paraded before noble Omegas who smiled too wide and smelled of political ambition. His mother's throne sat empty beside his own, a constant reminder of duty unfulfilled. The maid auction had seemed practical when his advisor suggested it, distasteful but efficient. And Omega needed protection. He needed an heir, a transaction both could understand. Lot 17, Lady Miriam of House Thorn. The auctioneer's voice rang out. Opening bid, 5,000 gold. Hands rose. The bidding climbed to 8,000. Nicholas watched with cold detachment as a trembling girl was sold to an alpha twice her age. Your Majesty. Donald, his chief advisor, stood at his elbow with a leather portfolio. Lady Elise of House Merrick is next. Excellent bloodline, trained in court etiquette. Her father controls the eastern provinces. No. Nicholas didn't look at him. Sire, you rejected every candidate. The council grows impatient. Then they can wait longer. Lot after lot sold. Noble alphas weighing bloodlines and beauty like livestock. The sound of gold coins counting, champagne glasses clinking, deals being struck in whispered conversations. This was how his world worked. Power bartered, alliances purchased, love never entering the equation. Lot 24. The auctioneer's voice changed, taking on an edge of distaste. No house name. No dowry. Opening bid 100 gold. A veiled Omega was led forward by rough hands. Her clothing was threadbare beneath a heavy cloak that had seen better years. She moved carefully, like someone used to being watched, to being hurt. But something in the way she held her head, spine straight despite the humiliation, made Nicholas lean forward. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Peasant blood, someone sneered. Why is she even here? Probably damaged. No one would bid on refuse. Uncomfortable silence stretched. The auctioneer looked uncertain. The girl stood motionless, face hidden, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles showed white through the veil. Nicholas felt something shift in his chest. He didn't plan to speak, didn't plan to move, but he rose anyway. 5,000 gold. His voice cut through the mockery like a blade. For the veiled one. The hall went silent. Every head turned. Donald's hand gripped his arm. Your Majesty. 5,000 gold, Nicholas repeated louder. Or does someone wish to challenge my bid? No one spoke. No one dared. The auctioneer stammered through the formalities. Sold to His Majesty for 5,000. Do you wish to inspect the merchandise before finalizing? Remove the veil. Nicholas's words were not a request. 2 handlers approached the girl. She flinched as they reached for her, then forced herself still. The veil was pulled away roughly, carelessly. The crowd stilled. Nicholas's breath stopped. Her face was delicate, carved with the kind of beauty that came from hardship, sharp cheekbones, full lips pressed tight with fear, skin pale from too many hungry winters, dark eyes that held old pain and older strength, and along her left temple, half hidden by dark hair that needed cutting, a burn scar. Puckered tissue in the shape of a timber beam's edge. Those eyes. That scar. The girl from Garrett Keep. The one who'd pulled him from the ruins 10 years ago while fire consumed everything. The one who dragged him, unconscious and bleeding, through smoke and flame. The one he'd sent 50 soldiers to find, only to be told she'd perished with the rest of Thornfield Village. She was alive. She was here. "It can't be you," he whispered, the words escaping before he could stop them. Her dark eyes met him across the distance. No recognition flickered there, or if it did, she hid it perfectly. Only exhausted dignity and bone-deep fear. Her shoulders set despite visible trembling. She didn't beg, didn't plead, just waited for whatever came next with the patience of someone who'd survived worse. The auctioneer's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Does your Majesty confirm the purchase?" Nicholas couldn't look away from her face. Yes. The contract was brought forward. His hand shook slightly as he signed. Only Donald noticed. The girl, the woman now, was led away by royal guards. She walked with her head up, disappearing through a side door without looking back. "Your Majesty." Donald's voice was careful, controlled. "What just happened?" Nicholas stared at the signed document. Black ink on cream parchment. A life purchased for 5,000 gold. He should feel triumph, or satisfaction, or at least certainty. Instead, he felt like he'd just stepped off a cliff. "I don't know," he admitted quietly. Lady Joan appeared at his elbow, her beautiful face tight with barely concealed fury. "This will ruin you," she whispered. "A peasant, with no lineage, no training, no value? What were you thinking?" He wasn't. That was the problem. Other nobles whispered as they passed. "Has he gone mad? A scared peasant? What a scandal! The council will never accept this." Nicholas stood alone in the emptying hall, holding a stranger's contract, the crown waiting in his carriage. He bought what he thought was a ghost, a memory made flesh. What kind of man did that make him? In a locked chamber on the palace's eastern side, Cora sat on a hard bench with her small cloth bag clutched in her lap. Everything she owned fit inside: one spare dress, a comb missing 3 teeth, the charred remains of her father's smithing hammer. She touched her scar with trembling fingers. Old habit, checking it was still there, still defining her. The king had recognized her. She'd seen it in his face, the shock, the disbelief, the ghost of that boy she'd pulled from fire and ash. But he hadn't remembered her. He'd remembered what she'd done for him. There was a difference. 1 month, she whispered to the empty room. "If he discards me, I'll disappear. Go west, somewhere no one knows my face." She'd survive. She always did. But tonight, with the phantom weight of his stare still on her skin, she let herself wonder, what if he didn't discard her? What if the boy she'd saved had grown into a man who kept what he claimed? What if that was worse? If this story has you hooked already. Chapter 2. The Journey North. Morning came cold and gray. Cora was woken by silent servants who dressed her in traveling clothes, fine wool, fur-lined cloak, boots that actually fit. Everything soft and foreign against her skin. No one explained where she was going. The royal carriage waited in the courtyard, black lacquer gleaming with gold trim. Guards on horseback, their breath misting in the freezing air. And standing beside the carriage door, already watching her approach, was the king. Nicholas Garrard looked different in daylight. Older than she'd thought. Lines of responsibility etched around his eyes, jaw tight with something she couldn't read. He wore traveling clothes instead of ceremony, but authority clung to him like a second skin. He said nothing as she approached, just opened the carriage door himself. She climbed inside. He followed. The door closed. They were alone. The silence was suffocating. Cora sat with her back straight, hands folded over her small cloth bag, everything she owned pressed against her stomach like a shield. Across from her, Nicholas sat perfectly still, golden eyes tracking every breath she took. The carriage lurched forward. Miles passed. Forest gave way to hills. The capital's noise faded into wind and wheel creak. Finally he spoke. You don't remember me? Cora kept her gaze on the window. I remember being bought, Your Majesty. The rest doesn't matter. 10 years ago. Garrett Keep. The fire that killed. I've survived many fires, Your Majesty. She turned to meet his stare, letting the lies sit heavy between them. You'll need to be more specific. His jaw worked. Frustration flickered across his features before the royal mask returned. He looked away first. More silence. Colder this time. The landscape changed as they traveled north. Green valleys surrendered to snow-capped mountains. The air grew thinner, sharper. Cora shivered despite the furs piled on the seats. Nicholas noticed. He always noticed. There are more blankets in the compartment beneath. I'm fine. You're shaking. I said I'm fine. He reached for the compartment anyway. Cora flinched. A tiny, involuntary movement she hated herself for. Nicholas froze, hands suspended in midair. Something like pain crossed his face. I'm not going to hurt you, he said quietly. Men who say that usually do. The words landed like stones. Nicholas withdrew his hand, settled back against his seat, and didn't try to help again. But Cora saw his hands curl into fists on his knees, saw the muscle jump in his jaw. Hours later, when exhaustion won and she finally pulled out the extra blanket herself, she caught him staring with an expression she couldn't name. The Ice Palace appeared at dusk, a massive structure of white stone and silver spires built into the mountain itself. Beautiful and terrible, like a castle from the dark fairy tales her father used to tell. Her father, dead now, because of the family whose crest flew from those silver towers. Servants bowed low as Nicholas descended. Cora followed, overwhelmed but hiding it behind a blank expression she perfected over 10 years of surviving. Take her to the East Wing, Nicholas commanded. The Queen's chambers. An older man, Donald, his chief advisor, stepped forward. Your Majesty, those haven't been opened since your mother. Open them. Nicholas's tone allowed no argument. He glanced at Cora once more, something unreadable in his golden eyes, then turned and strode away. Left her standing in a strange palace, surrounded by strangers, wearing dead women's furs. The Queen's chambers were beautiful and cold. Bedroom, sitting room, bathing room, all marble and silk and luxury that felt like mockery. No fire burned in the hearth, no warmth in the greeting. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Thorne, was efficient and distant. His Majesty will send for you when he requires your presence. Cora was left alone. She explored carefully, touching velvet curtains and silver candlesticks like they might burn her. Found a portrait above the mantel, a beautiful woman with sad eyes and Nicholas's sharp cheekbones. His mother, the last queen. Cora stood at the window as night fell, looking out at the frozen landscape that stretched endlessly into darkness. I'm still a prisoner, she whispered to the glass. Just a prettier cage this time. But something Nicholas had said in the carriage echoed in her mind. You don't remember me. Not a question. A wound. Chapter 3. The Ice Palace Life. 3 weeks passed like a slow freeze. Cora existed in golden isolation. Servants brought elaborate meals she barely touched. Silk gowns appeared in her wardrobe. She was bathed, dressed, presented like a doll for a child who'd lost interest. Nicholas was a ghost. She saw him only at formal dinners. Stiff, silent affairs where he sat at the head of a table long enough for 20 and watched her over crystal glasses and untouched wine. He never spoke to her, never explained what she was meant to be doing, never told her why he brought her here. The palace staff obeyed her requests but didn't speak to her. Whispers stopped when she entered the rooms. Servants exchanged glances she'd learned to read years ago: pity, contempt, curiosity. She was a scandal. The peasant the king bought on impulse, and now didn't know what to do with. Cora spent hours in the library, the one place she felt less suffocated. Books didn't judge. Stories didn't whisper. She was reading by the fire when Lady Joan found her. So this is where the king's curiosity hides. Cora looked up. The woman in the doorway was beautiful the way a knife was beautiful, all sharp edges and cold shine. Blonde hair perfectly arranged, gown of deep blue silk, diamonds at her throat that cost more than Cora's entire village. Lady Joan, the king's chief advisor. Cora had seen her at dinners, always at Nicholas's right hand. Lady Joan. Cora closed her book carefully. I wasn't aware I was hiding. Weren't you? Joan glided into the room like she owned it. Probably did, in every way that mattered. 3 weeks in the palace, and you've spoken to no one. I attended nothing. One might think you're ashamed. One might think I wasn't invited. Joan's smile was all teeth. Such pride. I suppose that's what caught his attention. That and... Her gaze lingered on Cora's scar. Novelty. Cora kept her expression neutral. She'd survived worse than a noble's cruelty. I came as a courtesy, Joan continued, circling the chair like a predator. To welcome the king's purchase, and to offer advice. How kind. Nicholas, His Majesty, has very specific needs. Political needs. The kingdom expects certain things from a queen. Bloodline. Connections. Skills you couldn't possibly possess. Cora stood, meeting Joan's gaze levelly. You're right. I don't know which fork to use, or how to curtsy for visiting dignitaries, or what political games you all play. But I wasn't aware I needed your approval, Lady Joan. Something dangerous flashed in Joan's eyes. No, only his. And that, dear girl, is the problem. She left in a swirl of silk and subtle threat. Cora sat back down, hand shaking slightly. Through the window, she could see Nicholas in the courtyard below, training with his guards. Shirtless despite the cold, moving through sword forms with lethal grace. He looked up suddenly, as if feeling her gaze. Their eyes met across the distance. Neither looked away. Then Donald called something, and Nicholas turned back to the fight, and the moment shattered. That night, Cora lay awake in the Queen's bed, staring at the canopy. She was 15 again, dragging an unconscious young man through fire. He'd been bleeding, broken, dying. She'd gotten him to safety, then fled when soldiers came. Never knew his name. Never knew he was royalty. Just knew he'd needed saving, and her hands were the only ones there. Now those same hands clutched silk sheets in a dead woman's room, and the boy she'd saved was a king who'd bought her like livestock and couldn't even speak to her. If you're enjoying this emotional slow burn, show the story some love. Hit that like button, and let's continue. Somewhere in the palace, Nicholas stood at his study window, staring at the east wing where a single candle still burned. You haven't spoken to her in 3 weeks, Donald said from the doorway. What would I say? Nicholas's voice was raw. I'm sorry my father burned your village to cover his crimes. I'm sorry I let you think I was dead. I'm sorry I don't know how to be anything but this. He gestured at himself. Crown, title, duty. Maybe start with her name. Nicholas went very still. The auction papers didn't. No. They just said Omega. Unclaimed. The king of Velmora had bought a woman's entire future and didn't even know what to call her. The shame of it bent him forward against the windowsill. Her name, he whispered to the glass, is Cora. How he knew, he couldn't explain. But he did. He'd always known. Chapter 4. The Ball and Public Humiliation. The summons came on thick parchment, delivered by a servant who wouldn't meet Cora's eyes. The grand ball. Tomorrow evening. Attendance is mandatory. Nicholas would formally present his chosen mate to the entire court. Mrs. Thorne arrived with an army of servants. Cora was bathed, perfumed, dressed in a gown of silver silk that clung to her like moonlight. Her hair was arranged in elaborate braids. Cosmetics covered the worst of her scar, though nothing could hide it completely. She looked like a stranger in the mirror. Keep your eyes down and your mouth shut, Mrs. Thorne advised quietly. Not unkindly. They'll be circling like wolves. I've survived worse than nobles. Have you? The older woman's gaze was knowing. These wolves don't use teeth. They use words. And they'll tear you apart smiling. The grand hall had been transformed. Hundreds of candles, banks of flowers despite the winter cold, musicians playing in the gallery. Alphas in dark formal wear, Omegas in jewel-toned gowns. The cream of Velmora society gathered to judge. Nicholas was waiting at the entrance, devastating in black and silver, the crown catching candlelight. His golden eyes found Cora, white and slightly. Something flickered across his face, awe, regret, before the royal mask returned. He offered his arm. She took it. The hall fell silent as they entered. Every eye turned. The whispers started immediately, loud enough to be heard, quiet enough to claim deniability. That's her. Pathetic. Look at that scar. He must be losing his mind. Nicholas's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. led her to the dais where 2 thrones sat, seated her beside his, then immediately abandoned her. Duty called. Nobles required his attention. Political conversations couldn't wait. Cora sat alone on public display, while the king, who'd bought her, discussed trade agreements and border disputes with men who looked at her like livestock. She kept her spine straight, hands folded, expression neutral. Inside, she was 15 again, watching her village burn. Lady Joan approached with 3 other highborn ladies, all beauty and barely veiled contempt. "Your Majesty!" Joan's curtsy was perfect, mocking. "You look lovely, though I must ask, where did you learn to carry yourself? Certainly not in any finishing school we'd recognize." The ladies tittered. Cora's humiliation was tonight's entertainment. "Perhaps the king enjoys the novelty," another lady added. "A beggar queen. How democratic." Cora met Joan's gaze steadily. "Perhaps the king values authenticity over performance, Lady Joan." Joan's eyes flashed with rage. "Authenticity? Is that what we're calling it? I call it charity. He felt sorry for you, a scarred peasant no one wanted. Don't mistake pity for affection, girl." Across the room, Nicholas stood with Donald and a cluster of nobles. He was watching. Cora could feel his stare. Donald murmured something urgent. Nicholas's hands clenched, but he did nothing. Their eyes met. She saw his hesitation, the war between pride and protection, between politics and humanity. She saw him choose politics. Something broke in Cora's chest. She stood carefully, smoothing her gown. "Excuse me, leaving so soon?" Joan's victory smile was sharp. "But the evening's just begun. I need air. I'm sure you understand. The company is rather suffocating." She walked through the crowd with her head high, feeling their stares like brands. No one stopped her. No one cared. The garden was freezing, snow falling in soft silence. Cora stood under a bare tree, breathing hard, shaking with rage and hurt she couldn't afford to show. Footsteps crunched on snow behind her. "They're cruel!" Nicholas's voice was quiet, careful. Cora didn't turn. "And you're a coward." Silence. Then, "You don't understand the politics." She whirled on him. "I understand that you brought me here, dressed me up, and let them tear me apart while you watched. I understand perfectly, Your Majesty. If I defended you publicly, it would have given the insults power, made you seem weak, like you needed my protection. I do need your protection." The words ripped out of her. "That's the hell of this. You bought me. You own me by every law in this kingdom. And you left me alone in a room full of people who despise me because you're too afraid of what they'll think." Nicholas stepped closer. Snow caught in his dark hair. "I know who you are. I've known since the auction." Cora's breath caught. Garrett Keep. The fire. A girl with dark eyes and burns on her hands pulled me from the ruins. His voice was rough. "You saved my life, Cora." Hearing her name from his lips was a shock. "Then you know," she whispered, "what your family took from me." "Yes." The word hung between them, heavy with 10 years of grief. "My father, my mother, my home. Everything burned because of a war I didn't understand." Cora's hands were shaking. "And you're still that same boy. Still trapped. Still too afraid to." Nicholas reached for her face, stopped just before touching. "I can't. This was a mistake." He turned and walked away, leaving her alone in falling snow. Cora stood there until she couldn't feel her fingers, tears freezing on her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered to the empty garden. It was Chapter 5, The Snowstorm in Truth. 1 week of silence followed the ball. Nicholas avoided her. Cora avoided everything. When the hunting trip was announced, the king seeking sport in the northern forests, Cora surprised everyone. "I'll join." The breakfast room went quiet. Nicholas looked up from his correspondence, golden eyes sharp. "The hunt is dangerous. The terrain. I'm told queens should know the kingdom." Cora met his gaze steadily. "Or am I not allowed beyond palace walls?" He couldn't refuse publicly, not after abandoning her at the ball. "Prepare a horse," he ordered through gritted teeth. The hunting party was 20 strong. Nobles, guards, servants. Cora rode near the back, ignored by everyone except Donald, who kept a careful distance but watchful eye. She hadn't ridden in years. Her thighs ached. Pride kept her upright. They were miles from the palace when the sky turned dark. Northern storms came fast and vicious. One moment a clear sky, the next a wall of white. Wind that cut like knives. Snow so thick you couldn't see your hand. The party scattered. Shouts lost in howling wind. A strong hand grabbed Cora's reins. Nicholas, appearing through the blizzard like a ghost. "There's a hunting lodge. Follow me." She had no choice. They abandoned the horses, stumbled through waist-deep snow. Cora's fine court clothes were useless. She fell twice. Nicholas caught her both times, his arm around her waist the only warmth in the frozen world. The lodge appeared suddenly, old stone, half buried in drifts. Nicholas kicked the door open, pulled Cora inside, slammed it against the screaming wind. Silence. Just their harsh breathing and the storm's muffled roar. The lodge was simple. One room, fireplace, basic supplies. Nicholas moved immediately, building a fire with practiced efficiency. Flames caught spread. Heat began to push back the cold. Cora stood shaking violently, soaked clothing freezing to her skin. "Take off the wet clothes." Nicholas didn't look at her. "You'll die of cold." "I'm fine." "You're turning blue." "Take them off or I'll do it for you." She wanted to refuse. Pride demanded it. But her fingers were numb, lips colorless. She fumbled with laces, buttons. Couldn't manage. Nicholas approached carefully, like she might bolt. "Let me." His fingers were warm against her frozen skin as he unlaced the riding dress, helping her out of the soaked layers. Left her in a thin shift. He wrapped her in blankets from the lodge's stores, settled her by the fire. Only then did he remove his own wet cloak. They sat on opposite sides of the hearth. The storm raged outside. Hours passed. "Why did you buy me?" Cora finally asked. Nicholas stared at the flames. "I told you. I recognized. You could have bought any Omega there. Beautiful ones. Noble ones. Why does no one want to?" Long silence. Then, "Because you were the only one who didn't want to be bought." The honesty of it was startling. "Everyone else was performing," he continued quietly. "Smiling, posing, hoping to catch a wealthy alpha. You stood there like you were waiting for execution. Like you'd already accepted the worst, and anything else would be a surprise." He looked at her finally. "You weren't trying to win. You were trying to survive. I understood that. So you bought me out of kinship." Bitterness crept into her voice. "Two broken people. I bought you because when they pulled off your veil and I saw your face..." He stopped, jaw working. "You were dead. I searched for you after the fire. Sent 50 soldiers to Thornfield. They said everyone perished. And then 10 years later, you appeared like a ghost, and I thought maybe..." "Maybe what?" "Maybe I could fix one thing my family destroyed." Cora laughed, sharp, humorless. "I'm not your redemption, your majesty." "I know that." His voice was rough. "I know I can never make this right. My father ordered Thornfield burned. Your father, the blacksmith, he'd seen evidence of corruption. Theft from the royal armory. So my father had him killed. Had everyone been killed to cover his crimes." Cora's breath stopped. "You knew. You knew it was murder." "Not then. I was 18 when the keep burned during the rebellion. I thought..." He ran a hand through his hair. "I believed what I was told. That Thornfield harbored rebels. It wasn't until years later I found the truth." He looked at her, eyes haunted. "I've carried the guilt of your village's destruction for 10 years. And then you appeared, and I thought if I could just... save me." Cora's voice shook. "Buy me like property, keep me in a golden cage, ignore me for weeks, abandon me to be humiliated? That's how you save someone. I'm terrified." The admission seemed ripped from him. "Of failing you. Of being the man my father was. Of..." He stopped. "Of what?" "Of how much it matters that you're alive." The fire crackled between them. Outside, the storm continued its assault. Cora touched her scar, an old habit. "You called my name. While I was pulling you from the fire. You were unconscious, but you kept saying, 'Cora, Cora.' I thought you were delirious." Nicholas stared at her. "My nurse. When I was a child. Her name was Cora. I barely remember her, but when I was hurt or scared, understanding dawned. I was calling for comfort, and you answered. The intimacy of it, of being needed and responding across time and trauma, settled over them. "I'm sorry," Nicholas said quietly, "for everything, for my family, for what I've put you through, for being too much of a coward too." Cora reached across the space, touched his face. The gesture from the ruins, from every moment between them. "You're still that boy. Still trapped." He leaned in. She didn't pull away. Their lips nearly touched. Nicholas jerked back, standing abruptly. "This can't happen." Cora, hurt and confused. "Why?" "Because I don't deserve forgiveness. Because this started as a transaction and I can't." He moved to the other side of the lodge. "I won't trap you further." He turned his back. Cora pulled the blanket tighter, tears silent on her cheeks. The almost kiss hung between them like the storm, violent and impossible to ignore. Morning came gray and cold. The storm had passed. Donald and guards found them. The ride back was silent. Whatever had opened between them was closed again. But Lady Joan, watching them return, saw something different in both their faces. Her plotting intensified. Chapter 6. The Hidden Letter and Betrayal. Cora couldn't stop thinking about the lodge, about Nicholas's confession, about the almost kiss that haunted her dreams. She sought refuge in the library again, searching for information about the rebellion. If she understood what happened, maybe she could make sense now. Hidden in an old chronicle of court proceedings, she found it. A letter, sealed with the royal crest, written in a strong, commanding hand. "General Thaddeus, Thornfield Village must be eliminated by week's weekend. The blacksmith possesses evidence of armory fund misappropriation. Leave no witnesses. Burn everything. Make it appear rebel-actioned. King Theodore Gerard. Thornfield. Her village. The blacksmith. Her father. Nicholas's family hadn't just accidentally destroyed her life. They targeted it. Calculated. Murdered." Her hands shook so violently the letter fluttered like a dying bird. She ran through the palace halls, propriety forgotten. Servants scattered. She didn't care. Nicholas's study. She didn't knock. He looked up from documents, surprise flashing across his face. "Cora!" She threw the letter on his desk. "Did you know?" He read it. Color drained from his face. "No. I swear I didn't. Your father ordered my father's murder." Her voice cracked. "Our entire village. Everyone I loved. Slaughtered to hide theft. And you brought me here, feeling guilty, thinking that makes it better. I didn't know it was targeted. I thought—" He stood, reaching for her. "You thought it was just acceptable war casualties. Just peasants caught in noble games." Rage gave her strength. "We were people. My father had a name, Michael. My mother was Alara. They had lives, dreams worth. And they were murdered because your father was a thief and a coward. I know that." Nicholas's voice was raw. "I know I can never make this right. I've tried. The gold I sent to rebuild villages, the laws I changed, the corruption I've rooted out. I'm not your redemption." She was shaking. "You can't buy forgiveness with gold and policy changes. I know that. I know I can never. Then why keep me here?" The question ripped out of her. "Why buy me? Why keep me in this palace like a ghost you can't quite exorcise?" Nicholas stared at her, golden eyes full of something desperate. "Because I'm selfish. Because seeing you alive means I didn't destroy everything. Because I—" He stopped. Couldn't say it. Cora waited. When he stayed silent. "Because you what, Your Majesty? It doesn't matter. You're still a coward." She turned to leave. "Wait." He grabbed her wrist. She jerked away like he'd burned her. "Don't touch me. Don't speak to me. I want nothing from you except what I should have demanded from the beginning, my freedom." She left him standing in his study, the letter condemning his father still on the desk. Absolutely gripped. Don't forget to like. This story is about to take its most dramatic turn yet. Lady Joan had been waiting for an opening. She'd heard the shouting through the study doors, seen Cora flee in tears. I watched Nicholas emerge looking destroyed. She went immediately to the Grand Council. "The King's judgment is compromised," she announced, laying auction documents before them. "He's bonded to a peasant with no bloodline, no training, no political value. It weakens the throne." Lord Pemberton, eldest councilman, frowned. "The King's made choice as his own." "Is it?" Joan's smile was sharp. "She was purchased, not courted. The bond isn't legitimate by law. and given his obvious emotional instability regarding her, I move for formal review. The council, swayed by Joan's political influence and their own discomfort with Cora's low birth, agreed. 3 days later, the summons came. Cora stood before the Grand Council in the throne room, packed with nobles eager for scandal. Joan presented her evidence like a prosecutor. No family, no education, no political value. The king made an impulsive decision. For the good of Velmora, it should be annulled. The council looked to Nicholas on his throne. This was the moment. Defend her or protect his power. Cora stared at him, waiting, hoping. Nicholas met her gaze. She saw the war in his golden eyes, duty versus desire, politics versus the heart he'd kept locked away. The council's concerns are noted, he said finally. I will consider the matter. Not a defense, not a rejection, a politician's answer. Devastation crashed over Cora's face, then cold resolve. She bowed, formal, distant. Of course, Your Majesty. As you will. She walked out of the throne room with her head high. No one stopped her. That night, Cora packed her single bag. Mrs. Thorne found her. Where will you go? Anywhere else. She left a note on Nicholas's desk. Tell your crown I don't need its mercy. Then she walked out of the ice palace into the snow. Nicholas found the empty chambers an hour later. The note in her handwriting, the first written word she'd ever given him, and they were goodbye. Donald stood in the doorway. She's gone. I know. You let her go. I had to. Nicholas's voice was hollow. The council would have fractured the kingdom. Civil war over an Omega with no political value. How many people should die for my selfishness? And how many have already died? Donald asked quietly, because men like your father chose power over people. Will you be different, or just another king who sacrifices what he loves for a crown? Nicholas stared at the note until the words blurred. What have I done? Chapter 7. The Reckoning. 3 days since Cora left. Nicholas was unraveling. He sat in his study surrounded by documents he couldn't focus on, meals he couldn't eat. The palace staff whispered. The council waited. Lady Joan preened, already planning which noble Omega to suggest next. Donald finally forced his way in, dismissed the servants, and locked the door. You look like hell. Nicholas didn't respond, just stared at Cora's note for the 1000th time. You won every war, every negotiation, every challenge. Donald's voice was hard. But you're losing the war inside yourself, and I'm done watching. I protected the kingdom. You protected your fear. There's a difference. Donald sat across from him. The kingdom would have survived controversy. The question is, will you survive without her? The council! Damn the council! The outburst was shocking from Donald. Your father ruled by fear and died alone, hated by everyone including his own son. You spent 10 years trying to be different, but when it mattered, you made the same choice he did. The comparison landed like a physical blow. You told me once, Donald continued quieter, that your father's greatest sin wasn't corruption. It was cowardice. He destroyed innocent people because he was afraid of being caught. He leaned forward. What did you just do? Nicholas's hands shook. I don't know how to be both, king and human. Then stop being king for 5 minutes and tell me, do you love her? Silence stretched. Heavy. Honest. Since the moment her veil fell and I saw she was alive, Nicholas finally whispered. Maybe since she saved me in the fire. I don't know anymore. I just know that every room she was in had color, and now everything's gray. I know I can't breathe right. Can't think. Can't. His voice broke. Yes. I love her. Completely. Catastrophically. Then you know what you have to do. The council will revolt. Joan will push for my removal. The kingdom could fracture. Donald smiled grimly. And if it does, you'll be a king ruling over ash, alone in this frozen palace forever. Is that the victory you want? Nicholas looked at his desk, covered in matters of state, edicts, trade agreements. All the things that seemed so important 3 days ago. None of it mattered without her. Find her, he ordered. Donald was already moving. The search took 2 days. Cora wasn't in the capital. Wasn't in any nearby village. Finally, a report came. She'd been seen heading south, toward the ruins of Thornfield Village. Nicholas understood immediately. She was going home. to the place his family destroyed, to grieve properly. He made his decision. He summoned the Grand Council to the throne room. Every noble house, every advisor. The room buzzed with speculation. Nicholas stood before his throne, crown heavy on his head. In 1 week, during the renewal ceremony, I will make a formal declaration regarding my mate bond. Gasps. Joan smiled triumphantly, certain he'd chosen annulment. Donald, standing at his side, whispered, "You have a plan?" "I have a choice to make." Nicholas looked at the council, at Joan, at the assembled power structure of Elmira. "And I need her to hear it." Donald rode south alone, finding Cora exactly where the reports said, in Thornfield's ruins. A small cottage stood on the edge of the burned village. Cora was staying there, helping an old woman who'd survived the fire. She was hanging laundry when Donald arrived. Looked thinner, tired, but free of the palace's weight. "The king requests your presence at the renewal ceremony." Cora didn't stop working. "Tell the king I don't attend ceremonies where I'm the entertainment. He's going to make a declaration. About you." He made his declaration when he sat silent. I heard it clearly. Donald dismounted, approached carefully. "Did you? Because the man I left at the palace is either about to do the bravest thing of his life or destroy himself. And I think you should see which." Cora's hands stilled on the wet cloth. "Why should I care?" "Because you love him too. Don't you?" She turned away, but not before Donald saw her face. "Even if I do," she whispered, "love isn't enough. Not against crowns and councils and politics. I won't be the thing he resents. The choice that cost him everything. Then let him make that choice with you there. Let him prove what matters more." The old woman, Mother Lynn, who'd known Cora's family, found her sitting in the ruins that evening. "The king's man is right. You should go. I can't watch him choose duty again. It'll break me." Mother Lynn sat beside her in the ash and new grass. "I saw you pull that boy from the flames 10 years ago. You didn't give up on him then. Don't give up on him, or yourself now. What if he disappoints me? Then you walk away knowing you gave him a chance. But you'll never know if you don't go." She patted Cora's hand. "And I think you need to know. One way or the other." That night, Cora packed her small bag. Not the silk gowns or jewels. Her own clothes. Her father's hammer. Everything that made her herself. If Nicholas wanted her, he'd get the real her. Not the doll he tried to create. "I'm coming," she told Donald the next morning. "But I'm not wearing a crown. And I'm not pretending to be something I'm not." Donald smiled. He wouldn't want you to. They rode north together, toward whatever waited. Chapter 8. The Coronation Confrontation. The grand hall blazed with candles and ceremony. Every noble house, foreign dignitaries, the entire court, packed to witness the renewal ceremony where King Nicholas would reaffirm his vows to Velmira and announce the fate of his unwanted Omega bride. Nicholas stood before the altar in full regalia, crown, ceremonial cloak, the image of absolute power. But his hands were unsteady. His eyes kept moving to the doors. Was she coming? The high priest began the ancient ritual. Nicholas recited the vows by memory, words about duty and sacrifice and serving the kingdom above all. Words that tasted like ash. Then Lady Joan stepped forward as chief adviser, holding a rolled parchment. "Before the final vows, there is a matter requiring your Majesty's seal. The annulment decree." The hall held its breath. Joan began reading. "It is the finding of this council that the mate bond formed between His Majesty and the Omega called Cora of no house is legally and politically unsound. The bond was impulsive, the match unsuitable. For the stability of the realm, we recommend." The doors opened. Every head turned. Cora stood in the entrance, not in silk court gowns but in simple wool, the clothes of Thornfield. Her dark hair uncovered, the burn scars visible. She looked like herself, strong, scarred, undeniably real. Her eyes found Nicholas across the crowd, waited. Joan continued reading, voice sharp. "We recommend immediate annulment. Does your Majesty consent?" "No." The word cut through the hall like a blade. Joan's face went white. "Your Majesty!" Nicholas reached up and removed his crown, set it on the altar with a heavy sound that echoed through shocked silence. Then he unbuckled the ceremonial cloak and let it fall to the marble floor. The symbolism was unmistakable. He was setting aside his kingship. The hall erupted in whispers. Nicholas descended from the dais, walking through the parted crowd toward Cora. His eyes never left hers. "You want a king who hides behind his crown," he said, voice carrying. "Who chooses power over people. Who lets fear rule him." He reached Cora, stopped before her. "I was that king. I wore the crown and let it blind me. I protected my throne and lost my humanity." He turned to face the assembled court, the council, Joan, every noble who'd expected him to bend. "My father burned an innocent village to hide his crimes. I've spent 10 years carrying that guilt, and when the woman who saved my life appeared before me, I was given a chance at redemption." He looked back at Cora. "I failed. I bought you like property, kept you like a prisoner, and when the moment came to defend you, I chose my crown over your heart." Then Nicholas did the unthinkable. He knelt, a king kneeling before an Omega, before a peasant, before everyone who judged her. The hall gasped. Joan tried to intervene. "Your Majesty, this is—" Nicholas ignored her. His entire world had narrowed to Cora's face. "You told me I was a coward. You were right. I'm terrified. Of failing you. Of being the man my father was. Of losing the only person who ever saw me as just. A boy who needed saving." Cora's eyes were filled with tears she wouldn't let fall. "I don't deserve forgiveness. I can't undo what my family did to yours. But I can offer you a choice I never gave you before." He took her hand. "Cora of Thornfield, I'm asking you, not as a king, not as a transaction, but as a man, will you stand beside me? Not as property, as an equal, as my mate, my partner, my queen." The hall was frozen. "You saved my life once," Nicholas continued, voice rough with emotion. "Let me spend the rest of it honoring yours." Cora looked at him, really looked, saw the boy from the fire, the broken king, the man trying desperately to be better. She touched his face, the gesture from the ruins, from the lodge, from every moment between them. "You beautiful fool," she whispered. "You really think a crown was what stood between us, wasn't it?" "No." Tears finally fell. "It was your fear. And mine." She pulled him to his feet. "I don't forgive your father. I won't pretend the past didn't happen. But I see you trying to be different. And I think—" She looked at the crowd, at Joan's fury, at the nobles who'd scorned her. "I think I want to try too. With you." Nicholas's breath caught. "You mean—" "I'm not afraid of them anymore." She turned to the high priest. "I believe there's a ceremony to complete." The priest flustered. "Ah, yes, but this is highly irregular." Nicholas picked up his crown. "Put it back on." But this time, he didn't let go of Cora's hand. "Then let's make it regular." His voice rang with command. "Cora of Thornfield will be my queen. Anyone who challenges this can face me directly." No one spoke. Even Joan was silenced. The ceremony concluded. Nicholas and Cora were formally bonded before the court. As they turned to face the assembly, Cora whispered, "You know this won't be easy." Nicholas smiled, the first real smile in weeks. "Nothing worth having ever is. If this moment gave you chills, smash that like button. One more chapter to go." The court bowed. Reluctantly, resentfully, but they bowed. And in the back, Mother Lynn watched with satisfied tears, while Donald grinned like he'd won a war. Which, perhaps, he had. Chapter 9. The Spring Rebuilt. 3 months since the coronation. The political fallout had been severe. Several noble houses protested. Joan left court in fury. The council was restructured. But Nicholas held firm. With Cora beside him, the resistance gradually faded. More importantly, the palace was changing. Cora opened shutters that had been closed for years, brought light into dark corners, spoke to servants as equals, learned their names, listened to their concerns, started a school in the palace for common children, teaching reading and numbers regardless of birth. She didn't wear the crown unless necessary. I walked the halls in practical dresses. I worked in the library, scandalized nobles and delighted staff. Nicholas watched her transform his cold kingdom and realized she was always meant to be here. Not as decoration, but as change itself. He found her one morning in the garden she'd planted, the first flowers breaking through snow as spring arrived early. "I want to take you somewhere," he said. They traveled south with a small party. Donald accompanied them, along with guards who'd learned to respect their unusual queen. When they reached Thornfield, Cora led Nicholas through the ruins. This was my home. That was the smithy where my father worked. That was the market. Her voice was steady now. Grief acknowledged, but no longer drowned her. Nicholas saw the destruction his family caused. I really saw it. I'm sorry. I know it's not enough. It's a start. She took his hand. And this helps. She showed him the plans she'd been drawing, designs for rebuilding Thornfield. Homes, a new smithy, a school. Nicholas added his own, a memorial for those lost. A library in her father's name. Investment to make Thornfield thrive. I want to rebuild it, he said. If you'll help me design it. Why? Because some things shouldn't stay buried. Because your father and everyone lost deserves to be remembered. Because, he met her eyes. Our children should know where their mother came from. First mention of a future, of family, of life continuing. Cora's breath caught. Children! Nicholas pulled her close, suddenly vulnerable. If you want them, if you want a future, with me. She kissed him then, properly, for the first time since the lodge. Soft and certain and full of yes. I spent 10 years running from the past, she whispered against his lips. From pain, from ever trusting anyone. You broke through every wall I built. You were arrogant, cowardly, impossible, and then you knelt before the entire kingdom for me. I'd do it again. I know. That's why I'm staying. They found Mother Lynn, still living in her cottage, on Thornfield's edge. Nicholas approached her carefully. I'm told you survived the fire. I'm told my family took everything from you. Mother Lynn studied him. That's true. I can't give back what was lost, but I can help build what comes next. If you'll allow me. He presented the plans for rebuilding Thornfield, detailed, funded, genuine. Mother Lynn looked at Cora. Is he always this dramatic? Cora laughed. Unfortunately. Mother Lynn turned back to Nicholas. You heard her again, and crown or no crown, you'll answer to me. Understood. Construction began within weeks. Nicholas worked alongside common laborers, the king with dirt under his nails, sweat on his brow. The people of Thornfield were wary at first, then slowly accepting. Cora bridged the gap. She was one of them, and she'd chosen him. That mattered. Evening, in their tent on the ridge, overlooking Thornfield. They were staying during the rebuilding, preferring the simple tent to palace luxury. Cora traced patterns on Nicholas's bare chest. Do you regret it? Giving up the easy path to find the council? I didn't give up. I chose what mattered. There's a difference. He caught her hand, kissed her scarred fingers. You were right in the garden. I was still that trapped boy. But you pulled me out again. We pulled each other out. They were equals now. The scars, his internal, hers external. Part of their story, not endings. The first building completed was a memorial. Nicholas and Cora unveiled it together on a bright spring morning. Names carved in stone, including Michael and Alara, her parents. Nicholas read the inscription he'd written. They are not forgotten. Their lives matter. Their loss changed us. Their memory guides us forward. Cora cried. Nicholas held her. The survivors of Thornfield gathered. A moment of silence. Then work continued. Life continued. Weeks later, back at Ice Palace. But it was different now. Warmer. Laughter echoed in the halls. The staff smiled. Cora had planted gardens that bloomed despite the northern cold. She was in those gardens when Nicholas found her, reading reports from Thornfield's reconstruction. The council wants to meet about trade agreements, he said. Do you need me there? I want you there. But only if you want to be. Always giving her choice now. Then I'll come. They walked together, hand in hand. King and queen. Alpha and Omega. But mostly, two people who found each other twice and refused to let go. That night, Nicholas stood in their chambers. No longer the cold queen's rooms, but a shared space they'd made their own. Cora came up behind him, wrapped her arms around his waist. What are you thinking? That I bought what I thought would save me. Or destroy me. He turned in her arms. Instead, you taught me that salvation isn't purchased. It's earned through humility, courage, and the willingness to be broken open. She kissed him softly. Very poetic, Your Majesty. I've been reading your books. I noticed. On the table, The crown sat beside Cora's simple wool cloak from Thornfield. Both mattered. Both were worn. But neither defined them anymore. Outside, spring continued its impossible arrival in the frozen north. Flowers bloomed where ice once ruled. Children played in palace gardens that had been silent for decades. And for the first time in 10 years, Nicholas slept without ghosts. In the cold kingdom of Velmora, spring came early that year. And the king who'd bought a peasant Omega learned that the best things in life aren't purchased. They're chosen, fought for, and built together from ash and courage and stubborn, terrifying hope. Thank you for listening to this journey of redemption, courage, and love that refused to die. If this story touched your heart, one final like would mean everything. 2 hearts, and please subscribe to enjoy more stories.